I was writing the video about the art that came out of COVID, and I found a recurring theme to be jokes. Why? In this situation where millions of vulnerable people were dying worldwide, was it possible to make people laugh while directly addressing that topic? I've thought a similar question when enjoying comedies about the Cold War boiling over and everybody dying to World War III, such as Dr. Strangelove or select songs by Sheldon Allman. We're talking about very real tragedies that changed the world, so why do we like to laugh when the world is falling down around us? Well, you could argue that the middle of a crisis is exactly where you would expect to find comedy, because a key aspect of comedy is incongruity. There is nothing more foundational to comedy than the surprise, an unexpected subversion, or the non sequitur of finding something in an unexpected place. The crisis is that unexpected place. Hence, comedy has all the material it needs to make something funny. Like calm in the eye of a storm, the perfect environment of comedy is when the surroundings are unfunny. Still, just because comedy can happen doesn't explain how it can overcome the social taboo of being irreverent to something terrible happening to real people. Now, the history of comedy being used in tragic situations goes back at least to ancient Greece. While Greek theatre mostly kept to strict rules that would separate comedy and tragedy, some historians believe that there existed the practice of writing tragedies that selectively used elements of comedies. Today we call this paracomedy. Now true, this is not a real event that's being joked about, but fiction feels like a safe place to start exploring our emotions, and we can learn a lot about societies from the self-contained stories they tell. For example, in Euripides' play Heracles, which is chiefly about Heracles going mad and killing his wife and children, we also see drunken dancing, cross-dressing, and a pair of brothers who play a cheeky prank on Heracles before laughing at his hairy bum. Now, those comedy moments are funny to the characters and they might be funny to the audience, but it can also be read as unsettling to worry about how a gradually maddening character is going to react to these provocative events. We can only guess why a Greek playwright would risk upsetting the tone of their very serious story by introducing comedy. It could be that lightening the mood early on creates a contrast that can help the tragic events feel worse. If you watch a play expecting tragedy, you may want to detach yourself emotionally and dehumanize these characters because you know something bad's about to happen and you want to emotionally protect yourself. But if those characters make you laugh, lighten the mood, make you feel better, and bring you to the unassuming light-hearted state that those characters are also feeling, that could set up an empathetic connection that helps you feel as the character does. The result of this in a tragedy is to have you feel the devastation of these characters as though they were real people you actually knew. That's an interesting concept. Humour can bring everyone to a shared emotional state, can help humanise the people around us, but that vulnerability can make us feel worse and add poignancy when a tragedy strikes. Comedy could be weaponised by writers, tricking us into feeling deeply for those around us when maybe we would rather be more guarded. Now that is very practical reasoning, where the playwright uses comedy as a tool to serve their art. A different, more philosophical perspective comes from Hegel's Aesthetics, which observes that what makes comedy unique is that it removes any seriousness from the drama. A comedian refuses to take the drama seriously and preserves their own emotional state by placing the drama at a distance. By refusing to acknowledge the severity of the situation, a comic character can observe and mock as an outsider, with no personal stake in events. To an absurd degree, such as joking with the audience or ignoring imminent danger, jokes can destroy the naturalism of a story and turn it into a parody. However, there are ways in which this reflects real life. In reality, a poorly timed, bad taste joke can make someone appear aloof and irreverent. To unhealthy degrees, it could even be seen as a defense mechanism to avoid facing the truth. What would be unnatural in a drama is other characters continuing without whacking the comedian around their head for their unwanted critique. Still, that would only apply to an inappropriate joke, when it seems that Hegel's ideal comic character is some ultimate deconstructive truth teller, using comedy to help everyone acknowledge the truth by deflecting some of the pain of its existence. So we seem to have two opposing purposes for comedy. It can be used to create empathy that results in heightened tragedy, or comedy can deconstruct a serious situation to ease or remove its sting. In the former, we are observing the tragedy in stark contrast to our prior joy and connection with the unfortunate characters. In the latter, the truth is slightly easier to stand because we're not feeling the full emotional weight, and the tone of writing can change which effect the comedy is having. Now, if we consider the purposes of comedy in relation to how we react to real-life events, we can see that both purposes are important for different reasons. It depends if the individual wants to feel their tragedy more or less. Let's start with comedy that makes us feel worse. When something terrible happens to us, our mood drops. Comedy can be upsetting when we realise that our potential happiness, or the happiness of those around us, is in contrast with how we're feeling now. While that clash may hurt, it can be helpful too to ensure you're not stagnating for long periods in a single emotional state. Periods of low mood are natural. It's just important to remember that happiness still exists, potentially in you. This may hurt more if you start to just wish you could be happy instead, but reconciling the existence of your sadness with your potential for happiness is part of feeling better. Comedy can be especially helpful when it builds empathy through a shared emotional state. Being around people and having shared experiences reminds us that we're not alone in our sadness. Now let's consider comedy's other use in times of tragedy. When something very worrying happens, the worst thing to do is to indefinitely ignore what's happening or pretend that your very real emotions don't exist or aren't important. So, how can dissolving something serious be helpful? In one instance, it may provide perspective. If you are wholly focused on one horrible event, the startling contrast of someone placing distance between you and the event can remind you that the tragedy is only part of life. A temporary distraction can be helpful. Alternatively, if the tragedy was a mistake or something that can be learned from, phrasing advice as a joke can deliver important information without sounding like a harsh accusation. Context is, of course, of utmost importance. Depending on their individual thoughts, it may not be the right time for some or any comedy for some people. But it is the risk, the edge, and the contrast that gives comedy its striking effect in the first instance and makes it a sharp but powerful tool in emotional regulation throughout a crisis. It's as if humour's natural state is dire situations. When the world is scary and uncertain, comedy has potential to aid us with some emotional stability. It can humanise us and those around us, creating comforting, empathetic connections. By its incongruous nature, a joke is a different perspective. A joke can help us distance ourselves and look at a problem more logically, or explore our feelings so as to not hide from what we find disconcerting. While comedy alone has no practical effect on a situation, a threat that requires practical action can make us forget to treat our emotional state. To our mood, comedy can be a lifeline in a situation where we need all the help that we can get. Don't forget to go and watch my previous video about all of the different art that comes out of COVID, which was the inspiration for this one. Thank you for watching.